Hi everyone, welcome to this DW live stream. We're live in Berlin. We're going to be talking about what Israel's plans are in Lebanon today.
And with the Strait of Hormuz largely shut, we asked the big question, I guess, is Asia facing an energy crisis? I'm Anthony Howard.
I'm Anya Coopers-McKinnon. So Israel's military has begun destroying bridges in southern Lebanon as it's stepping up its military operations against Hezbollah. Israeli forces struck one bridge on Sunday. You can see it here. That was one bridge being destroyed. Israel's defense minister is saying that Hezbollah militants were using it and others to move fighters and to move weapons into southern Lebanon, which is, of course, close to the Israeli border. Lebanon's president, Joseph Aoun, has called the bridge attacks a prelude to a ground invasion. So he's saying that this means that the Israeli forces are going to start a ground invasion into Lebanon. Now, the destroyed bridge, again, there's a map here that you can see. The destroyed bridge spanned the Litani River. That runs east to west, and it's basically the separating line. It's the line that separates the south from the rest of Lebanon. Now, that's the region you see tagged by that red geo marker. It's a waterway that's gained a lot of importance in the conflict between Israel and the pro-Iranian Hezbollah militia in Lebanon. So we have got lots of questions about this. You probably will have to send them in to us.
Via TikTok and YouTube. The chat is alive. A few people coming in from the USA already. Let us know where you're watching from, but also don't forget, it's really important that you help us guide this conversation. We've got three really interesting guests to talk to, I think. You can make them your resource as well as we go along. So please put the questions in chat on YouTube, live chat, and across on TikTok as well. Please do it.
That's right. We're going to be bringing in those questions and comments of yours. So we want to start by speaking to DW's Beirut bureau chief. His name is Mohammed Traite. He is going to answer our questions and hopefully some of your questions as well. Mohammed, thank you so much for being with us. Now, I believe that you are outside a displacement camp in Beirut. Is that right?
I'm actually at Beirut's waterfront. This is Beirut's downtown, the heart of Beirut. What you see behind me are pubs and nightclubs, which would be bustling in this time of the year at night. But what you see down there behind me is thousands of tents for displaced people. This is basically turned into a makeshift refugee camp for thousands of internally displaced people who are staying here. They have nowhere to go. They don't know what to do. The schools and makeshift shelters that the government had set up as refuge for the internally displaced are overflowing with displaced people, and therefore these people don't know what to do. They cannot afford to rent apartments. They don't have relatives, family, or friends to stay at here in Beirut, as they come from the southern suburbs of Beirut, from southern Lebanon, from the Bekaa Valley areas that have been struck by Israel.
Mohammed,
so they're just taking...
I'm just going to interrupt you there because the sort of the human catastrophe is a major part of this conversation, and we are going to talk about that in just a while. I wanted to ask you a few questions first, though, about the politics and the military side of this, just to kind of set the scene. And we've just been talking about these Israeli attacks that we were seeing there on bridges, essentially on Lebanese infrastructure, and I wanted to ask you about that. Israel, on the one side, says it's destroying terrorist infrastructure, it's protecting Israelis, but Lebanon is calling this, as I just said, a prelude to a ground invasion. Why is Lebanon's president saying that, do you think? Can you explain?
Well, Lebanon's president means that these are main bridges, the civilian infrastructure that every Lebanese has to cross, has to use going in and out from southern Lebanon. And not only Hezbollah lives in southern Lebanon. There's hundreds of thousands of Lebanese who are not necessarily connected to Hezbollah who live there and have to use these bridges and roads that Israel is striking to go back and forth their works to get aid. I mean, as we speak now, there's thousands of Lebanese that are still in their towns and villages south of the Litani River, and now it's becoming much harder to deliver aid and electricity and basic needs to them, just because these roads were blocked. Now, Israel is saying that Hezbollah has been using these roads to smuggle weaponry and transfer its combatants, its militants. And is this a possibility? Yes, but is this also a possibility that Israel wants to strike these infrastructure to cut off Lebanon's towns south of the Litani River from the north as part of its a plan to invade southern Lebanon, create the buffer zone, the no man's land that Israeli officials has been speaking about? That is also a possibility.
Mohammed, just got a question from YouTube from OBS Testing 114, watching our live chat on YouTube. What is the strategic importance of the Shia corridor? Is southern Lebanon the first domino to fall?
Excuse me, can you come again? I couldn't hear you.
A question from YouTube asking about the strategic importance of the Shia corridor.
Well, basically the region south of the Litani River is a main hub for the Shia community here in Lebanon. It's basically hundreds of thousands of Shia live there. Not only Shia, but it's hundreds of thousands of Shia live there. The majority of them, I would say, support Hezbollah, not necessarily affiliated with Hezbollah, but they do support Hezbollah because at one point this area was occupied by Israel until the year 2000, and it was Hezbollah who actually drove Israel out along with other resistant group back then and militant group back then. But the area is extensively known as a base and support for Hezbollah, where hundreds of thousands of Lebanese, particularly from the Shia community, live. And it is very strategic to pull them out of this area for Israel. And this in Lebanon is creating growing concerns around potential demographic changes, having over 1 million displaced. Scores of them are from the Shia community, based now in Beirut and elsewhere across Lebanon. This is also creating concerns among the hosting communities. So what you see on the social level, like the social unity that you see on the community supporting each other, there's a parallel reality for this. And it is the political divide around Hezbollah, around Hezbollah's decision. And that is becoming much more visible among the communities here in Beirut and in Lebanon.
Mohammed, just to give everyone a bit of background and context, this obviously isn't the first time that Israel has moved into Lebanon. You know, there have been military operations. There were military operations back in the 70s and 80s. Can you tell us, you know, what was the aim then? What do those previous military operations tell us about how difficult it's going to be to achieve anything now, you know, 40 to 50 years later?
Exactly. The pattern is quite familiar. Like up until the year 2000, Israel was occupying this part of southern Lebanon. And it was Hezbollah back then was, until the year 2000, operating almost on a daily basis, sending rockets towards and actually striking Israeli positions in southern Lebanon. And the pattern now, and what we're hearing from Israeli officials, that they want that means that basically the Israeli military will be present again in southern Lebanon, will be occupying parts of southern Lebanon, and that will definitely affect the livelihood over there. If Israel's announced plans to create a buffer zone on the border continues to further near the Litani River, that's almost 30 kilometers inside Lebanese territory, and there's hundreds of thousands of Lebanese who live in these areas. So this is a catastrophe for them. So many of the people who are displaced now here in Beirut, we speak to them, they have low expectations that they would ever go back to their towns. We've spoken to people the moment they moved out of the Litani River after the Israeli evacuation orders, and they were devastated because it feels that pattern is very, very familiar to them. They were displaced for so many years from this area, only went back after the year 2000, and now they're risking to again lose their livelihood.
Mohammed, I've got a couple of questions for you about Hezbollah and then the Lebanese government in particular. And then we are actually going to hear from some people in Lebanon. And then we're going to talk to you specifically about your experiences, what you're seeing. I mean, as you were saying, Hezbollah militants have been firing into Israel. Can you give us a sense of how much of a threat Hezbollah is to Israel today, right now, given, it was obviously weakened by Israeli attacks in the last few years, but what is its threat level today to Israel?
I mean, we're seeing that Hezbollah is still operative in southern Lebanon, is still able to send rockets and drones towards Israel and create some sort of a hustle and actually create damage in towns in northern Israel. The group was definitely weakened, severely weakened during the last war, especially after killing most of its top leadership, but is still able to send rockets. Everyone knew that Hezbollah still had some capacity, some military capabilities to strike Israel. The question was whether it wants to take the burden for that, because Hezbollah knows all too well Israel's response to that. But we're here, we start into this situation. Hezbollah is striking Israel almost on a daily basis. Yesterday, it announced more than 50 military operations on northern Israel. Israel is, for the past 48 hours, not hit Beirut, but is still striking heavily in southern Lebanon, including the footage that we've seen at the beginning of this live stream, striking and cutting roads and main bridges to cut off Lebanon's south from the other part of Lebanon.
And Mohammed, just a word on the state that Lebanon's government is in right now. I mean, in the past few years, it has had a load of, the authorities have had a load of challenges to deal with. Right now, how strong is Lebanon's government?
It is, I mean, the influx of refugees is just immense, and the government ability to deal with this is very, very narrow because, Lebanon has been already reeling from an economic and financial crisis for years now, and this is still unresolved. Lebanon's resources are very, very limited. The economy, basically, there's no economy in Lebanon. So the government's ability, even the social society, the civil society ability to support the over 1 million displaced people is very, very narrow and very slim. So Lebanon is just in a better position on the political level than it was before the 2024 war, the last major war between Hezbollah and Israel, just because the government is, as the Prime Minister says, has took off taboos of negotiations with Israel. It's been very outspoken about the plan to demilitarize Hezbollah, to disarm Hezbollah, to again disarm any militant groups in Lebanon, and initially start kind of a peace talks with Israel. So in that sense, Lebanon is in a better position. It's getting more support from the Arab community, from the Arab regional community and the international community to do so. But the government's ability to intervene with Hezbollah and to impose these decisions on Hezbollah is not yet at the level where Hezbollah would respond to the government, even though it is actually part of the government, but it has lost the majority within the governing alliance.
Mm-hmm. So we're going to stay with Mohammed just for now. I do want to say that there are some great questions coming into chat, particularly on YouTube. A lot of them relating to what Donald Trump's plans were. I thought that might be best asked to our next guest, and we will put them to our next guest, including, has Trump made his plans any clearer yet? Well, just on that, we are getting word in that Trump says the deadline is now off. Now, we're going to get confirmation and get the official words that came out of Trump's mouth or via Truth Social, whichever way that has come to pass. But a lot of our questions do relate best to our next guest. Anya, I believe you want to play something first.
Yeah, exactly. Because as we were saying, Mohammed, I mean, how this is affecting the people in the region specifically, now we're talking about the people in Lebanon, is a major, major part of this. We're going to listen to some people in speaking in Lebanon, and then we'll come back to you, Mohammed.
We were at home, and then we suddenly saw the rockets coming at us in the village. We packed up and ran away. People on the road told us there was a hotel here where we could stay.
The situation is bad. Really, really bad. There is no aid for all of these tired people. The aid coming is very little.
We just want to go back to our homes, that's it. That everybody can go back to their homes and be safe. This is what I hope for.
No matter what happens, we'll endure. We'll fight for the land so that we can live in it with dignity. We'll stay in our tents, but God willing, in a day or two and after victory, we'll go back to our homes.
All right, Mohammed. So hearing there, people are displaced. They just want to go home. There's not enough aid. The situation is just really bad. Tell us from your experiences, from what you're seeing and experiencing yourself. I mean, what is life like for people in Beirut, for starters, right now?
Well, this is exactly what I'm hearing from people. They just want calm and go back to their homes. But I'm also hearing from them that they have much, much lower expectations on this everyday passes and by the hour, because they see that the fighting and this conflict is only growing. You see behind me the number of people, displaced people in these tents. It is also growing. I was here 10 days ago, and there was barely 20. The street across the other. I mean, it's really been a very tough situation for these people, and the more you talk to people, you understand that they feel that this round of war is much more destructive to their homes, much more disruptive to their lives. So they have lower expectations as the conflict keeps growing on the border, but also in here in Beirut. It's been very tough hours for them. Many of them, they need sanitation, they need water, they need food, and the ability to support them is really, really slim.
Mohammed, can I ask you, if I can, personally, about your own experiences in the last weeks? I mean, what is the situation like for you and for your family?
I mean, I had to move my family from their home to a safer place. And that's only one aspect of how life is disrupted for so many Lebanese. Still, I cannot complain because I have a roof over my head. You see behind me, thousands of people have no roof, have no toilets, have no hot water. So I just really cannot complain. It's just like there's a growing impression that the situation won't get better anytime soon. There's growing concerns that people will stay displaced for so long, and many times displaced, I would say, because I myself had to be displaced twice with my family. There's growing impression that things could go wrong. There's no safe place in Beirut. Like, relatively, some neighborhoods are considered safer, but I tell you, like 3 days ago, right across the street from where DW offices are, and DW are relatively in a safer neighborhood. Right across the street, a few hundred meters away from DW's office, an Israeli strike hit an apartment building and destroyed it, set it to the ground. So there's a growing sense that nowhere is safe in Beirut. There's a growing sense that people will take this burden for a long, long time.
And that presumably, Mohammed, is also the case outside of Beirut. People are displaced, there's not enough aid, people are really struggling.
Yes, definitely. It's a big burden for everyone, for the million who have been displaced, but also for the hosting communities here in Beirut. I mean, as I was saying, there's a social unity on the aid level, on the society level, but there's also a very political divide. Only yesterday, a social debate and political debate erupted just because claims that the government is setting up a makeshift shelter here right behind me near the port, which is a predominantly Christian area, and there will be influx of Lebanese Shia who come from the south, from the Bekaa Valley, from the southern suburbs of Beirut, who will be sitting there, and that also creates another layer of problems in Lebanon, and it brings back scenes from the how Lebanon is dissected between political and sectarian lines, where each neighborhood and each district of Beirut is predominantly belonging to one sect over the other. And that is a loop. Lebanese feel that we are in a loop, and it's not ending, and it's not going to end anytime soon, especially when it comes to the question of the question of Hezbollah, disarming Hezbollah. How will this end? No one knows.
Mohammed, thank you so much for speaking to us. Mohammed is, of course, Mohammed Treite is DW's Beirut Bureau Chief, bringing us up to date on what this situation is like for people in Lebanon and the political and military side of it as well. Mohammed, thank you so much. We want to talk about the bigger picture now, and we are going to talk about Donald Trump. Now, Donald Trump had on Saturday given Iran, because obviously all of this, the big picture here is the Iran conflict, the US-Israeli war on Iran. Donald Trump had given a 48-hour deadline to Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. And he posted on Truth Social basically saying, if you don't open the strait, we're going to obliterate your power plants. That was Trump's threat to Iran. That deadline was due to expire later today. Now, we have a new post on Truth Social from the President of the United States. And it says, I have instructed the Department of War to postpone any and all military strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for a 5-day period, subject to the success of the ongoing meetings and discussions. OK, so that is Donald Trump delaying that threat and basically saying, OK, Iran, you've got 5 more days.
That, of course, dominates the chat at the moment. Even before that news coming out on Truth Social and Donald Trump just repeating, says now the deadline is over. Luna on TikTok says, does that constitute the re-emergence of the famous taco symbol for Donald Trump? Trump always chickens out. Alban Chambers 5579. I think those thoughts will be echoed by a few right now.
All right, we want to talk about this with Ben Talablu, who is there. We can see him. Thank you so much for joining us. He is from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies. That's a research institute, a non-partisan research institute in Washington, D.C. So we heard Donald Trump first giving a 48-hour deadline. Now, just now, in the past minutes, posting, oh, actually, we're going to give you 5 more days. Just give us a sense of what's going on here. Is Trump chickening out here? Is it, what is going on and what does this mean?
Well, pleasure to be with you. I think what we're seeing now with week 3 of this conflict is that as much as it may have started over politics and security, the past week has really pushed it into really a conflict that will be defined as much as politics and security, but also by energy and economics. In particular, if the president is looking for an off-ramp that constitutes a public military win, one of those off-ramps are very much likely going to be opening or reopening or freeing for international commerce, oil trade, and other kind of passage in the Strait of Hormuz into the Persian Gulf. And it's highly likely there that the U.S. is still weighing its options, but also weighing its options in a way that allows it not just a military win, but a political win. We've had folks talk about, the civilian damage to critical infrastructure that going big against power plants, across the country could produce, and the challenges that would create for both the U.S. and Israel, who are looking for not just a random military win in the region, but to nest that into a larger political strategy against the Islamic Republic post-conflict. And to that end, there may be a more targeted way to do this. I, for one, think as much critical infrastructure should be left as possible, particularly because you do want to enact a political strategy against this regime. Perhaps that may mean going after some oil pumps, be it on Kharag Island or anywhere else. But you just had, as one is talking about power plants, about an hour or so ago, Rafael Grossi, the Director General of the IEA, also warned about the one still functioning low light water reactor in Iran's southwest, Bushehr, needing to be immune from any kind of attack. Much like, unfortunately, unlike what happened in Ukraine with the Zaporizhia reactor. So the conflict, I think, is still widening. I think there's no side is really backing down. The 5-day delay has to do with the new framing for the conflict. But anyone else, I think, would see that it's still very much a kinetic one. Just pictures coming up online, limited social media access, of course, but of explosions across the country as early as 4 hours ago.
Mm-hmm. You raised the possibility of Donald Trump looking for a political victory right now. What would a political victory look like at this point, 3 weeks into a war?
In my view, and this is my personal opinion, there's really only 3 sorts of political victories I think the president can hang his hat on, which is why the conversation in Washington for the past 2.5 weeks has been about the military element of that. And as much as the U.S. and Israel have been pushing back militarily, the Islamic Republic is not necessarily attriting America or Israel's military capability and capacity, which is the nature of the U.S. and Israeli military mission. It is trying to attrite the will, which is why it's widened the war, going after energy and critical infrastructure, things of that nature. A political win against this backdrop, in my view, one would be regime change or driving the next round of street protests. Number 2 would be a significant negotiated surrender, a negotiated surrender that has a managed political transition that agrees to really give up those capabilities that the regime is losing on the battlefield today as it relates to its ballistic missiles and drones. Number 3, if we had to stargaze, would say if the president would still settle for a Venezuela 2.0 sort of option in the Islamic Republic. I, for one, don't believe that is possible, but I, for one, still think that animates some in Washington, and that may be driving them. But those are, I think, the 3 political wins. I think it's much harder to get any of these, which is why we are having the conversation be dominated by, will the U.S. reopen the Strait militarily? Will the U.S. seize the enriched uranium inside the country? Or will the U.S. more likely just continue to defang the regime's missile and military and drone program?
You speak to my next question that comes from YouTube, from Luxy1234, asking what will Iran do? We ask a lot about what the US will do next and what Trump will do next. What will Iran do if Trump starts signalling that he is willing to back down? Do they have other objectives? Will they press him harder? Do they have any say in what comes next?
Well, in so many ways, everyone has a say, because this takes 2 to tango. This is a conflict that I think the Islamic Republic believes it's fighting for its life in. And so meaningfully, it is trying to restore deterrence so that it can limp along if it survives this conflict, whether that's turned off all of a sudden by America backing away, or whether that's a negotiated process whereby America and Israel turn off the fighting altogether, or if there's more international mediation in it. But I think Iran is looking to say that despite us being weak, we are still lethal. They are trying to prevent, actually, what we discussed before, any kind of follow-on political strategy that can contain them, that could roll them back. I want to stress for the audience right now, turning on a limited military conflict, and even a 3-week one is a limited military conflict against the Islamic Republic, given how historic it was that there was no conflict on their territory for 3 decades, kind of like the 12-day war. That means the post-war period, if the Islamic Republic remains in power, is going to be just as critical. And that's where, unfortunately, I think sometimes Washington may take their hands off the wheel. I warned after the 12-day war that the situation we were moving towards was an Iraq-like situation, but not at all Iraq 2003, Iraq 1991, where there was containment of a regime that was defeated abroad, but still strong enough to repress its own people at home. So I think the regime is lashing out so much to try to make de-escalation favorable for it, But in the short term, I don't see any de-escalation or off-ramp even being offered by this regime. It's really the Trump administration that's been talking out loud about the kind of scenarios that could lead to the end of the conflict.
Behnam, I just wanted to ask you a question about the Iranian people. When the US-Israeli attack started on Iran, Trump was telling the Iranian people that help was on the way, encouraging them to rise up against the government. Given the way that this is going, I mean, do Trump's threats essentially risk pushing Iranians, towards their own government, away from the US?
I would actually say here, no. I know much of the literature looks like, anytime there's a foreign conflict, particularly when there's a gap between state and society, that there could be a rally around the flag effect. That was a big fear from the 12-day war, if you remember. But fast forward 6 months after the 12-day war, still in 2025, Iranians didn't rally around the flag. They chose to go out into the street and burn the regime flag and erect the pre-1979 flag. And that led to the mass contagion of protests that we saw in June, against the backdrop of which that exact rhetoric that you mentioned about President Trump encouraging Iranian protesters who were already there. It wasn't like there was no protest movement, no discontent. The president rode the wave of the protests, giving them more moral and political support than any U.S. figure in the past 47 years of the Islamic Republic. And now that the U.S. is really meaningfully defanging and decapitating this regime, I, for one, think that, again, based on the dribs and drabs of what you can get out of social media and also landline calls, which are important to note, which is one of the few ways that information is coming out of Iran. If you correlate this stuff and put it into a mosaic, the Iranian people are absolutely afraid of their own government, but the prevailing or the predominant sense that you get is anger. They are angry that they've even had to be pushed to embrace a military option, meaning that the Iranian population have tried everything. They've tried voting, they've tried peaceful protests, they've tried protests en masse, they've done all of this unarmed for over a decade, and they've still been slaughtered. So I don't see the population really bridging the gap with the state, because A, there's not much left of the state, and B, the state is offering them no intellectual, political, or social off-ramp to be able to graft onto. Iranian nationalism has been rising the more Islamism has been failing in that society, which really does give the West, and in particular exiled Iranian opposition, a chance here in a post-conflict scenario.
Behnam, we've got a question from one of our YouTube users. OBS Testing 114 is asking, when will all this end? I mean, the conflict's been going on for a good 3 weeks now. Is there any end in sight?
I do think there is an end in sight. There has been, at least if we're measuring things militarily, success against the missile and drone program, and in particular against the beating heart of Iranian ballistic missile production. Those are sites at the Hojir facility, at the Parchin facility, at the Shahroud facility. There's also lesser missile production in places like Semnan and assembly in places like Isfahan. All of those sites have been struck. I, for one, even using open source commercial satellite imagery, can match anywhere from 19 to 22 underground or subterranean missile sites that have been struck. The question really is, what next and what's the off-ramp? If I had to guess, we're in a 1 to 3 week window for the potential end of the conflict, if the conflict is going to be defined by military end states. There's always a chance, of course, it politically escalates, and there's absolutely always a chance that the energy and economics framing dominates the political and the security framing. But the president himself has been the one talking about timelines the most, and he's the one who has hinted at 4 weeks. Now we're at 3 weeks. It's likely that it could go on a bit more, but I would say this is a conflict that the U.S. is measuring in terms of weeks and not in terms of months. The challenge is, just to go back to a previous question, it takes two to tango. What if the Iranians don't give America that off-ramp whenever America sees that the balance is in its favor to de-escalate?
That's the fascinating and rather grim possibility, and it's reflected in the chat as well that came through on TikTok earlier, is what happens and how confident are we that just in the case that Israel and the US stop bombing Iran, that Iran are going to feel like they're happy to stop sending weapons the other way? Will Iran necessarily stop? Are they in a mood to play nicely when this is all over?
Well, there is a very sharp contrast here, which is it's their mood versus their relative capabilities. And then there's an open question as to command and control, or what's left of the chain of command and control here, because that has been significantly weakened. Both Israel and America, more so Israel, have been able to drill down against several layers of this command and control. And you have almost autonomously Iran's missile and rocket forces being able to fire in all sorts of directions. I mean, Iran is at war with the Arab world. That is no small, there's no other way to put the missile and drone fire against the GCC and some other countries into perspective without that. And if past this prologue, there are times even when sometimes behind the scenes adversaries coordinate an end to a conflict. Even in those cases, the Islamic Republic is quite keen to be seen as publicly getting the last blow in. This was exactly how the fighting ended in 2020 after the U.S. killed Soleimani. This was exactly how the 12-day war ended, at least between the U.S. and Iran, when the Iranians got the last word in by striking a U.S. radome in Qatar at the Al Udeid facility. The question is, what if America is not keen to let Iran get the last word in? And what if the regime escalates in a different theater? How would that be read in a process of managed de-escalation? I think the most likely case is that it causes more escalation rather than people hunker down and continue to de-escalate. So the tweeter or the email, the individual who sent the note is absolutely right to worry about Iran not wanting to play ball here. And let me add one more wrinkle into the situation, which is what if the U.S. does step back, but really steps back and hands it over to Israel and says, actually, why don't you continue with the drilling down against the security forces? And the challenge there would be, would Iran turn off the war against America, but not turn it off against Israel? Or would it continue to go against Gulf energy in a bid to get the Gulf to try to exploit some kind of gap between America and Israel? It's very much a kaleidoscope right now, which is the best thing that policymakers, governments, audiences, analysts need to be able to do, is to see the options available and develop contingencies for every single options, because we very much are rotating between them, sometimes even multiple contingencies within the course of a single day.
Ben and Ben Talablu, thank you so much for answering our questions and our viewers' questions. You're from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies in Washington, D.C., and we really appreciate you coming to talk to us. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot's going on.
There's a lot going on.
The chat is lighting up. I might actually try and change course here and share my screen if I can at some point. We, of course, have been talking about the last minutes. We're looking in the top right-hand corner here, and we always talk about the world reacting to Donald Trump. What about the price of oil reacting to Donald Trump, saying the 48-hour deadline is not going to be? Now, look at that from, minutes ago, a high of $98 down to 89 just in the last 15 minutes. That, I guess, we'll speak to our business colleagues, but it's very, very interesting timing that the price of oil would come down that sharply right at the moment when Trump has called off this 48-hour deadline. So we're going to transition to talk about the effect in Asia. We're going to bring in Rick Glowett, who is DW's correspondent down there. Rick, you've been living in Southeast Asia for 15 years in places like China, Myanmar and Hong Kong, en route to where we find you today in Taipei. We often turn to markets, and I've just shown a graph about the oil price coming down sharply in the last minutes. But I wonder just on the eye test, what you see and you feel on the streets of Taipei in Taiwan there. Are you starting to see and feel an effect of this crisis, even though we've had that good news to some degree from Trump in the last minutes? Do you see an effect of this crisis as it plays out in Asia?
Yeah, this crisis has been affecting Asia massively, from places in Southeast Asia that really rely on all of that oil to the big manufacturing hubs here in East Asia, South Korea, Japan and Taiwan. So all of these three countries really rely on importing a lot of oil from the Middle East, as much as 80% in some of these countries. So if we take Taiwan, for example, obviously it's been paying a lot more to get different types of energy imported, scrabbling around to get the LNG on the spot market, for example. So we've seen that the markets have gone down quite a lot all over Asia, including here in Taipei over the day of trading. And today we also saw petrol prices, gas prices at the pumps going up for the first time. The government here helps to subsidise fuel here, but that has gone up today. And of course, we're just getting into summer here. A lot of people will be putting their aircon on, and there's worries that the electricity prices will be next.
Right. I want to get some context on just the size of the crisis we are in. We always refer back to the 70s, Rick. Just bear with me. I want to bring in the Executive Director of the International Atomic Energy Agency, Fatih Birol. We're going to have to listen really carefully just to understand the size of what we're going through now compared to the size of the oil crisis, the famous ones of the 70s. Let's have a listen to Fatih Birol.
The situation is very severe, I can tell you that. Let me explain you how challenging the situation is. Many of us remember the two consecutive oil crises in 1970s, 1973 and 1979. And at that time, in each of the crises, the world has lost about 5 million barrels per day. Both of them together, 10 million barrels per day. And after that, we all know that there was major economic problems around the world, the recessions. And today, only as of today, we lost 11 million barrels per day. So more than two major oil shocks put together. Plus, after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, the gas markets, especially in Europe, we lost about 75 billion cubic meters, 75 BCM. And as of now, as a result of this crisis, we lost about 140 BCM, almost twice. So the situation is, if we want to put in a context, this crisis, as things stand now, two oil crises and one gas crisis put all together.
All right, Fatih Birol, the Executive Director of the International Atomic Energy Agency. I played that, Rick, just so we do get the idea of how big this is. If we stay where you are in Taiwan, to what extent, what powers Taiwan? How much do they rely on what energy sources? And how quickly does this get extremely concerning for the powers that be in Taiwan to run their country?
So Taiwan, like a lot of other countries in this region, big manufacturing hub, and it's an island, so it has to import a lot of its energy. Taiwan relies on a lot of oil, coal, and a lot of liquid natural gas. So that latest, the plant in Qatar is also affecting Taiwan. What can Taiwan do? Well, Taiwan has some reserves, some stockpiling of oil, coal, and liquid natural gas, but not enough to last a long time. The government here is first trying to reassure people, saying that there's enough to get through this month, April and May, and then in June that they're hoping they'll be getting more liquid natural gas from a new contract they signed with the US quite recently. And in the meantime, it's about putting the prices up and managing that, the economic side of things, yeah.
Rick, regionally, I guess, to ask what effect this will all have on Asia, it's way too broad. If we're talking about energy reserves, let's break it into two very large, more manageable, though, pieces. East Asia and Southeast Asia. Southeast Asia is where if there was no oil deliveries over the next weeks and months and no gas deliveries, what places get hit the hardest if this continues for another 2 to 3 weeks?
Yeah, so it's Southeast Asia that's really getting hit a lot harder than East Asia. That's because they rely on importing the finished products, not the crude oil. They rely on importing after they've been refined in other parts of Asia, usually sort of South Korea, Japan, or China. And we're really seeing some sort of COVID-style responses from governments there. In the Philippines, government workers are down to 4 days a week. There's mandates to work from home. People encouraged not to take transport. There's also, not putting the AC on too high. And it's also going to have a really big impact on kind of manufacturing and agriculture. And these countries in Southeast Asia also have less of the reserves that we're seeing in East Asia and also less money to kind of offer subsidies to help their citizens weather this storm.
Rick, I just wanted to jump in and ask you a question about China, because some of the comments in our chat are talking about China, and we've got at our carrion asking, how does the conflict affect the Chinese interests in the region? And if you could tell us sort of how heavily China has been affected by all of this.
So China's an interesting one in this region. China's quite a close friend of Iran. They have a strategic partnership. And as much as 90% of Iran's oil does go to China. So China's really weathering this storm very well because for the first part, like I just mentioned, it has that link with Iran. So we know that ships that are linked to China are more likely to be able to pass through that sensitive strait, the Strait of Hormuz. China, at the same time, has got an incredible amount of strategic reserves. It's got the biggest stockpile of oil in the world, 1.2 billion barrels, I believe. China also, unlike the other East Asian countries, is not an island, so it has other ways to get energy, and it's also really quite self-sufficient. It's got its own ways to get hydrocarbons, but it's also very good at sustainable energy sources, wind and solar. There's also a lot more electric vehicles there, so they're less reliant on petroleum.
Mm-hmm. Rick, just at least one more from me before we go. I just wonder, bringing those two subjects together, China and Taiwan, they are difficult bedfellows to say the least. What has been that conversation? Has there been a conversation struck up since this energy crisis started, given what you've just told us about the relative strength of the Chinese position and perhaps the weakness of Taiwan? What's that conversation been like?
Yeah, well, like many of the big geopolitical events in the last few months, China has managed to really bend this to their advantage and positioning Beijing as a responsible partner, a world leader that can help other people. So it's been reaching out to Southeast Asia to say that it could help with fuel stocks there. But significantly, it's also mentioned to Taiwan that if Taiwan, which is a country that Beijing claims as part of its sovereign territory, that if Taiwan was to unify with China, then Beijing could help it through this energy crisis, which this was, flagged by Taiwan's government as being another part of Beijing's cognitive warfare, the way that it uses carrot and stick measures to kind of prevent Taiwan from pursuing proper independence.
Rick, great to talk. I imagine that offer won't be taken up, but really good to tap your experience after 15 years in the region and, of course, living in Taipei. It's been great to chat to you. We'll chat again soon.
Thanks, Rick.
Right, before we go, shall we bring everyone up to speed with the latest developments in the US-Israeli war against Iran and its ripple effects around the world, some of which we've just been discussing. President Donald Trump says the US will postpone all strikes against Iranian power plants and energy infrastructure for 5 days. This came in a Truth social media post after what he calls productive discussion. Israel has begun destroying bridges in South Lebanon. Israel says it's to prevent movement of terrorist operatives and to protect Israeli civilians. Lebanon's president calls the strikes a prelude to a ground invasion. Also in Lebanon, authorities say Israeli strikes have killed more than 1,000 people and displaced more than 1 million since the start of the war.
And that's it. That's all we've got time for. That is your update on what is happening in the Iran conflict. Thank you for watching. Thanks for sending in questions and comments. Thanks to everyone here for making the live stream go smoothly as it could.
Yes.
Great to have you with us. Thank you.
Bye-bye.